Hey everyone, this is Joe Turner, and we're going to do something a little bit different with this episode of the City Manager Unfiltered podcast. Usually I'm interviewing city managers, county managers, and the like. What happened was I wanted to set up an interview with Marilyn Rivers, who's the former director of risk and safety for the city of Saratoga Springs, because I wanted to bring her on as an expert on insurance to talk about how we can help city managers, county managers, department heads go over their insurance policies, find savings, extract efficiencies, and help build resume bullet points, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to help you guys who are listening to this podcast become better professionals and to help you grow and advance in your career. And so we were going to have Marilyn on to talk about her expertise in insurance. And it was through this process that I learned that Marilyn Rivers had gone through a very unfortunate set of circumstances in the city of Saratoga Springs, where she had been employed there for 20 years. Now, about 18 and a half years or so into her employment with the city, a new commissioner was elected who became mayor, and he essentially tried to turn her world upside down. She was being pressured and forced out of office, and she almost didn't make it. We're going to talk about her situation and how she survived to get to the 20-year mark. And eventually what happened is she filed a claim against the city, and we're going to talk about that in this episode. So this is going to be part one. We have not recorded the second part yet. The first part of this interview was recorded about 2.5 months ago in the middle of April. Stay tuned in the future. We're going to try to record the part two in the very near future. And that's going to be primarily designed, again, like I said, to provide direct benefit to you as the city or county manager or department head to be going over and reviewing insurance policies so that you can find some wins. Okay, that's what I want to give you guys, wins. Now, before we get to that episode with Marilyn, I want to give you a quick update on the American Association of Municipal Executives. Things are going fantastic. We have people signing up every day. And I want to share a couple of names with you that I have permission to publicize that have signed up to the American Association of Municipal Executives. The first one is Bradley Ford. He's the Waco, Texas city manager, and he is also the entrepreneur, the brains behind city compensation. I've had Bradley Ford on the podcast before to talk about Taylor Tedder's groundbreaking contract in Rehoboth Beach. He's got the largest database of city manager contracts and city manager compensation in the nation. And I've talked about the paradigm shift that's coming, that's here in the public sector. He is part of that paradigm shift. And I'm very excited about having this expert in our community. He's going to be sharing his expertise, his insight into the current market dynamics in our community. And he's a founding member, and I couldn't be more stoked to have him. The second city manager that I want to drop on you guys that signed up to be a founding member that I can proudly announce is Port Huron City Manager James Freed. He was on the podcast, episode 17, to talk about his lawsuit against the ICMA. They publicly censured him back in June of 2022, as you guys all know, and he's filed a defamation lawsuit against the ICMA. The ICMA keeps losing in court, and that is marching towards a jury trial. That is either going to be settled for a 7-figure check to James Freed, or it's going to go to a jury trial. I can guarantee you guys that, one way or the other. It is going to happen. He is now a member of the American Association of Municipal Executives. So those are just two of the big names that we have in the profession who have signed up, that are supporting the AAME, they're founding members. And I want to invite you, if you're listening to this podcast, if you want to be a part of our community, if you want to be able to interact with these individuals, if you want to be able to interact with a bunch of other city managers and public sector executives who want to champion you, support you, help you develop your career, help you grow your career, then you need to join the AAME today, because we are the only professional association out there that is advocating on behalf of the city manager and other public sector executives. Nobody's out there advocating for you, your needs, your wants as a city manager or a public sector executive. This is literally a once-in-a-lifetime historic opportunity to get in on the ground floor of an organization that is changing public administration and is the only professional association that represents city managers and public sector executives. Join Bradley Ford in Waco, join James Freed in Port Huron, and you know what, guys? There's other city managers that have joined that I can't talk about just yet. We have city managers representing communities of over 500,000 people, down to the small town city manager. We have aspiring city managers. We have assistants. We have deputies in the organization. We have members in transition. We have retirees. We are building something truly special that's bringing connectivity and connectedness to public sector professionals. We want to help you build stronger relationships and friendships. We want to help you develop your career. And ultimately speaking, we are going to be advocates who not only fight on behalf of city managers and public sector executives, but educate the public and local elected officials as well about the issues facing you in your career. Because right now, things are getting out of control with the toxic political environment, the divisiveness, the social media landscape. There's just a bunch of issues out there that need to be addressed, and we are the organization that's going to fight back on that for you. So get in on the ground floor today. Go to aame.org, sign up, and hope to catch you on the inside. Now, on to the interview with Marilyn Rivers. All right. I'm Joe Turner, and this is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. On the horn with me today is Marilyn Rivers. We got in touch because of a mutual connection. I was exploring the idea or topic of risk management and insurance premiums and how we might be able to do an episode to inform city managers and county managers about how they might be able to extract value by looking at their insurance policies and saving some money on the coverage and so forth and so on. And so Marilyn's name was provided to me, and we had a brief sort of exchange on a LinkedIn Messenger probably, I don't know, a month or two ago. And it didn't really go much there at the time. And then I'm reading my daily newspaper scans and articles, and I see the name Marilyn Rivers pop up on a settlement for Saratoga Springs, New York. And I'm like, oh, that name sounds a little familiar. And sure enough, it's Marilyn Rivers, the same person. And so Marilyn and I, we got on the horn. We did a little pre-interview screen for this interview. And during that process of talking about the settlement, she shared some thoughts and some stories with me, and also some concerns and frustrations about how that process was being handled. And so what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a two-part episode. This first part is going to be a discussion about her time in Saratoga Springs and what she went through there, and give her an opportunity to share her story. And then in part two, we're going to get more into her subject matter expertise and how we can provide more direct value to you as a city manager when it comes to insurance and risk management. So Marilyn, with that brief little introduction for me, why don't you add a little bit more depth and context to your expertise and experience for those who are listening today?
Thank you, Joe. Hey, my name's Marilyn Rivers. I am a risk warrior. I started my career with the city of Saratoga Springs back in 2003. I have bachelor's in chemistry, master's in physics, CPCU, an ARM, and an AIC. They are designations in underwriting, risk management, and claims. The designations are somewhat important because as the city of Saratoga Springs insurance program was canceled for them by a company called Coregis back in 2002, they were told point blank they had to get a professional risk manager in to improve their claims history and to institute some protocols to govern somewhat seamlessly.
So this is setting the stage for you to come in as the risk manager or whatnot, and you start in 2003, and you were there for a solid 20 years, and we're going to get to the end of your tenure in a moment. So you literally built this sort of whole thing from the ground up. Is that a fair representation of your experience there?
Totally. There was no manual. We combined risk and safety, so I was also the safety officer. We had a small group of safety committee members. I think we started out with 10 and we finally went to 19 because we made it multidisciplinary. We won an award along the way, Public Risk Manager of the Year in 2007. We decreased our deductible. We
Wait.
actually
You're saying 4 years after you started, you were getting recognized as the one of the best in the entire state?
Country, actually country,
Country.
because
Wow.
public risk manager for 2007 was it was an award given by my peers across the country.
Wow.
So an application was made, and it was peer reviewed by the organization, and then Public Risk Management Association. They chose me in 2007 for that award, and then thereafter I became a board member and then was asked to spearhead a national education program actually became a global one because we had some students from the UK and some other countries that would attend, and it still exists today. It's called Prima Institute, and it's held every year, and it's a training program for public risk managers, right, or professional finance professionals.
That's a phenomenal accomplishment, Marilyn. That's pretty amazing to start from the ground up. In 4 years, you're getting that kind of recognition. So clearly, you're doing a bang up job there.
Well, I appreciate that because it was always a highly politicized environment. The biggest obstacle was achieving consensus because I had a wonderful opportunity to work with law enforcement and work with emergency management. I actually, at the last part of the career with the city, served as the county local emergency planning committee, right, for emergency management. I was the county chair for I think the last 5 years of my career, even through COVID. And the bottom line was that we were able to come together. The position back in 2003, in New York State, it's civil service tested. The city had tried to say that it was going to be an appointed position, and then the state took a look at it, and Saratoga Springs is a commissioned form of government, and they said, yeah, no way. This this lady's got to take a test, and that way she'll be protected by civil service law in New York,
Okay.
and you won't be able to, so easily get rid of her, right?
Okay.
So
Well, maybe we should delve into that now because now that's a nice little segue because you spent 20 years with the organization. If I'm being fair, Marilyn, you kind of were pushed out and left before you were really ready to go, even though you put your 20 years in. Why don't you? Is that a fair representation of your
yeah,
situation?
I was fortunate in the fact that in my commission form of government, I had worked for a commissioner of accounts, and he had two rules throughout the 16 years I served with him. First rule, follow the law. Second rule, the community comes first. So I was increasingly given a tremendous amount of responsibility and autonomy, right? So when I spoke, I would always get my direction from him. But when I spoke, I always measured my response so that it met those two criteria. He decided not to run for reelection in 2021. So for 2022, a brand new shiny group of folks came in, and they were totally interested in overhauling the form of government or the policies and procedures that were there.
So, Marilyn, you enter Saratoga Springs in 2003 as this new person as far as the risk manager and safety and all that whatnot. And in 2003, there's a little bit of a dynamic shift because the insurance company has basically said, "Hey, we're not covering you anymore unless you take some aggressive steps to change this." And then they bring you aboard, and at the same time, in 2003, the commissioners passed a resolution to essentially add, I believe, was it risk safety into your department, or can you
Yeah.
unpack that a little bit?
Yes. Up until 2003, the Commissioner of Accounts department had the property and casualty insurance, but it was really purchase of insurance, right?
Okay.
There was no risk management component. Safety officer had long since retired, so everything was dormant.
Okay. And so in Saratoga Springs, which is a true commissioner form of government, which I've never had experience with personally, but the way it kind of operates, as I understand it, is each commissioner has their own specific area or areas of responsibility. And it's almost like five mini city managers who are responsible over their own little kingdom or fiefdom within the government functions. Is that correct?
It is correct. In this particular situation, when they added the risk management, the risk and safety component, and gave it to the Commissioner of Accounts, what it did was it relieved the city attorney, who is under the mayor's silo, of that same responsibility. So it totally shifted it.
Did that create tension then or internal tension at the time as far as you understand it? Because that might be a little bit of a power play dynamic because effectively if you have five commissioners, I mean, one's called the mayor, but you have five commissioners and one department or two another department's being shifted from one silo to the other's responsibility. Did that create any sort of political tension or friction at that time?
I mean, it didn't at the time. It was a really much needed responsibility. There were some hardships and trials and tribulations in those early years, but we, I tried to work in partnership with the city attorney and not leave him out of any of the discussions. And that relationship, although the city attorney is politically appointed, and I was not, because I had taken a test by that time with
Right,
civil
you're the civil
service test.
service, right? Yep, yep.
I always worked with the assistant city attorney and the city attorney, and would work on projects as assigned by them, right? And as I showed the work that I did, I got more and more responsibility. The one thing was being able to create documentation of all of the claims that were happening and to be able to better communicate them to the city council and the commissioners and the mayor. Up until myself coming on at the time, that had not been occurring. So when you have a lack of communication, then that's when risk goes bad.
Absolutely, especially when you have all these different silos and maybe the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing or whatever the case might be, I would imagine can get kind of touchy.
Yeah, and then the issue with, law enforcement, there really wasn't anybody that was interested in getting out of the office, going to talk, listening, trying to understand what the issues were. So there were great strides in public works, law enforcement, and then the fire department.
So around 2003, there's a little bit of a reorg in a sense of added responsibilities put into your department, and you're under the commissioner of accounts, and for about 16 years or so, everything's going great. You're working with this commissioner; they're getting reelected. You're kicking butt and taking names. You're winning national awards and getting recognition for all your accomplishments and successes within your own job duties. What happens? How do things go bad? Basically, about a year ago, you're getting pushed out of the organization or being pressured to get pushed out of the organization, and we have potential lawsuits and settlements. What happens from that point? Can you walk the audience through what changed?
So the city council flipped in 2022, January 1st of 2022. There were multiple, the mayor, the commissioner of accounts, the commissioner of public safety, the commissioner of finance. They just decided the whole COVID thing really took the air
It's
out of a
toll,
lot of
huh?
folks.
Okay. All right.
And they decided not to run for reelection.
Okay.
And everybody was weary at the time. There was a new group of folks that came in, and they had different ideas.
Okay.
And as any new elected body comes in, everyone thinks they can do better than, they're going to ride in on a unicorn and they're going to do everything really fantastically great.
Right. Meanwhile, what
The
you've been doing has been great already. I mean, it's almost like if it ain't broke, why fix it? It seems like you've been humming along over there in under the commissioner of accounts doing your work. So
Right, but the biggest piece is that if you have a set of policies and procedures that have been approved and that have worked for a great many years, and all the employees are following them, and then you get elected officials who are coming in who don't read it, and they say they're going to give something better, and that was the rhetoric that occurred in 2022. I'm going to make it better, and then nothing ever materializes. To this day, the same risk and safety manual is legislatively in effect that was approved in November of 2021. So there's a whole bunch of rhetoric in 2022 and 2023 about people making the city's policies and procedures better, and that didn't happen.
So in 2022, there's this election and there's a big upheaval. And you've been there for now, almost 20 years at this point. Yeah.
18, 18.
Yep. Yep.
And
And
then the
and then what's the power play? What's the power dynamic? It sounds like the mayor wants to snatch your department out of the commissioner of accounts and bring it over to the mayor's silo, or what's the
Well, it started out that he had let go both city attorneys that were under his jurisdiction. And there was a
because
question
they're
that was
political appointees, right? And he has that authority to do it, correct?
he does, and he and his deputy were lawyers by trade. So they, there was a thought that maybe they could do that role, and there was a dust up that was happening in the first quarter of 2022 that didn't involve me, that involved the city court. And the city court said no. The city has a charter. According to the charter, the mayor's position is separate and distinct from the city attorney's position. And that's what they argued, the
Okay,
judges.
got you.
So there is a tremendous amount of political rhetoric going on. And at first, everyone was getting along, right? There was like a kumbaya moment, with the exception of the Commissioner of Public Works, excuse me, who had suffered a life-changing medical condition, and he passed away at the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter of 2022. So
Okay.
he was really in the hospital at the time. So the four new members were running governance, and the issue is that all of the previously approved policies and procedures were given. Everybody's doing their job. I'm civil service tested. I'm just trying to hum along as best as I can.
So are there any rumblings at this point though that there's going to be attempted reorg or to snatch your department and put you over under the mayor's silo, or what? How does that happen, or what's the evolution of that?
The Commission of Accounts, and it's all in the public record. As you pull up the city council meetings, you can see it on tape. They started fighting over particular cases and the handling of the cases and the settling of the cases. And there was an accusation that I was usurping the authority of the city council by through my role, and that I was acting as an attorney. And
Who's making these allegations? You gotta unpack that.
the new mayor
Okay.
was making that accusation. And so the lawyers for all the cases that were, that they were defending the city were like, hey, no, she's not doing that. She's like our document person. She's helping us triage the file back at your end. We're the lawyers. Like, we're getting paid to defend the city. So what's up here?
So
And
was the mayor engaging in just was this just political rhetoric? Was there a personal history or issue between you and the mayor? Like, why was the mayor just ignorant to the process? Like, why was the mayor going on this rampage about you and your department and sort of misrepresenting what's going on?
I had previously worked with him when he was the Commissioner of Public Safety back in 2005 to 2009. And there at that time had been a bad relationship between the city council and my commissioner of accounts at the time. So I think that I carried the excess baggage from all of those previous encounters, even
Interesting.
though I hadn't directly participated. But issue is, if you're a good soldier, you're doing your job really well, and you're representing your boss in a positive manner, and they think that as you're walking through a situation that you carry the support of your boss, that's going to happen, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
had a very
So
again,
you're almost seen as a loyalist to that commissioner as opposed to an independent public servant just doing your job, right? It's almost is that
correct, because
yeah.
as folks came to realize that if I was saying something, then my commissioner, my boss at the time, was supportive of that, because in reality, any issue I would have run by him, and I would have had a discussion to see what his viewpoints were, right? Because it's important to him, as an official, to be adequately represented and to make sure. Again, I had two rules: follow the law, Marilyn, and always put the community first, Maryland.
Okay.
And so in dealing with past history, sometimes people come out on a negative side of that when they may have other motives, and rhetoric follows. So
Got you.
2022 was a lot of political rhetoric, but it started to go really bad when the elected officials who were having all those kumbaya moments all of a sudden became political adversaries.
Got you.
And
Got you.
then my position, because it was a very strong, prominent position, um,
You found yourself in the crossfire, so to speak, right? Or the crosshairs. Is
well,
that fair?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
and there was nothing I could do. I reached out for advice and assistance from human resources and the city attorney and received no support whatsoever. So
But before we get into that, Marilyn, so I want to see if there's anything more worth more unpacking on this front. So the mayor that you had interacted with back in 2002, 2005, 2009, that you seemed to, not that you got crossways with them, but for whatever reason they were kind of not your biggest fan or had friction with you. What was the source of that consternation or upheaval? Like what was the beef? Was there a beef?
well, there had been some uh, charter challenge attempts to change the form of government to a city manager's form of government.
Okay.
And there had been a drive to build a new police station immediately in back of our current city hall.
So the public
And
safety commissioner wanted that police station, and your commissioner of accounts didn't, or did
city
you did
council
you oppose
didn't.
it? The city council
No,
didn't.
no. I would have followed the direction of the city council no matter what, right? If there's a
So somehow you're the bad guy because the council didn't want a police station in the back of city hall, and all of a sudden you become tainted by that with this commissioner who's now the mayor 10 years later.
because the city council said, Marilyn, you need to make you need to fix all the problems with the police station because you're the director of risk. You're the At the time I was a manager of risk and safety, and then I think I became the director in 2012. But the city council tasked me because New York has a thing called PESH, which is a form of OSHA, right?
Okay.
It's the New York version, and they had written the city up, and so and the insurance company at the time worked with us to say, hey, you can refurbish this place, right? Let's put the money in to refurbish it,
As opposed to building from scratch or a new addition, right? Is that what?
right? And instead of millions, let's do hundreds of thousands, right? Because that's what we can afford right now. That's what the appetite is.
Right, and so the
So
governing body is giving you these marching orders, and somehow or for some reason, the public safety commissioner, who's now the mayor 10, 15 years later, which is where we pick up the story, he gets
remember,
crossways with you and doesn't like you and that whole deal, right? Okay. That just
yep,
seems so petty and juvenile, but okay, I guess I shouldn't expect anything less in the public sector nowadays with governing officials. So this mayor is trying to pull you out, your department over under their silo, and there's all of this personal baggage that they have with you. What is that? How does that manifest itself on a daily basis? How are you being treated, or what's happening?
my current boss would come into the boss that I had in 2022, the new one, and his representatives would come into my office almost on a daily basis saying, you're going to get fired. He really hates you. And I'd say, who hates me? And they'd say, the mayor. And I'd say, well, how do you know the mayor hates me? Well, because they told me. So I never, it was always hearsay, right? But when you have
Right.
someone coming to your desk and, pointing a finger and
Not
saying,
just
today's
somebody.
your day.
Yeah, not just somebody. You're talking about another commissioner. I mean, that's that's not just a
Yeah.
coworker. Yeah, yeah.
And at the same time that I was experiencing it, the assistant police chief was experiencing it. The police chief and the administrative lieutenant in the police department. So it wasn't just me.
You mean they're all being targeted by the mayor's office too?
By their commissioner of public safety,
Oh,
right,
gotcha,
and the
gotcha.
city
Okay.
council. So it's not. It's almost as if they took a group of us that had traditionally helped manage the city's processes, right?
Right.
'Cause we're just trying to make government work.
Yeah, yeah.
The number one issue is that there was a lot of consternation from some protesters with through social media campaigns that went across the country. Law enforcement is bad. You people are killers. So when you have a group of elected officials who are listening to that and they don't like the status quo and you are the status quo, that's not a good. measures.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So you and a bunch of your colleagues are all under fire at the same time, but from various different sources, from the mayor's office or different commissioners or whatnot. So you guys are kind of under siege at this time.
yeah, we were under siege, and when we reached out just for some help to try and mitigate the situation, no one would help. So it came down to the fact that I had, a year and a half to go for my pension and my retirement benefits, and I had to get there. And there was no one, because I didn't belong to a union. There was no one to help.
So, but walk me through then for somebody like myself who's ignorant to the civil service in New York. What kind of danger were you in? It's one thing for a commissioner to come and say, "Hey, Marilyn, the mayor's out to get you. You're going to get fired or whatnot." But aren't you protected under the civil service from just being fired? You're not a political appointee. So, what is the risk? Can you walk me and the audience through that risk?
That's the whole point. I mean, I in that entire time frame, there were no complaints against me. I was never written up. I was never brought to task. It was just all verbal innuendo and rhetoric that today's going to be your day.
Yeah,
And then I said, "Well, what are the issues? What are the charges? What's the process?" Well, there's no process. These people just don't like you. And it's like, well, and then I was like, okay, let me just tell them that I wasn't going to retire. Let me just tell them I'm going to retire. Let me just try and, put the letter out there saying, thinking that if I put an email out there saying, hey, I'm going to retire, maybe you'll leave me alone.
right. Like
And
I
it
just got
just
a year and a half to
escalated.
go, right? Yeah, yeah.
It just escalated. And then I filed, because it was escalating, I filed a hostile workplace complaint. It never got investigated. And then I
What do you
filed a
mean?
second
What do you mean
one.
never got investigated?
It never got investigated. I mean, if you theoretically, if you send one, the policy says if you send one to human resources, it's supposed to be investigated as to the validity of the complaint. And by that time, the complaint was it. All you had to do was pull up a city council meeting, and you could see they tried to pull my position 5 separate times.
You
Like
mean they put
five
you
times.
what do you mean by pull your precision 5? They tried to remove like to,
Change it. The mayor's department had 5 agenda items on 5 separate meetings, changing the reporting
structure, right?
from
To move you over to the mayor's
yeah,
silo, right?
5 separate times, and each of
Yeah.
those 5 separate times there was a tremendous amount of rhetoric, and it was all negative.
You're
And
right,
it was
right.
that I wasn't, they were going to make things better. I wasn't doing my job. There were kerfuffles along the way, and I was like, "What's a kerfuffle?" I had to look it up in the dictionary, actually, right? And then I looked, and I was like, "It's a political commotion." Well, I'm not political, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what's the deal? And then finally, when I couldn't get heard, and I was afraid that I was going to lose my pension, I filed a notice of claim, and I listed categorically, and it's out there in the social media world. All I did was reference every one of the city council meetings where they said all the stuff that they said. I didn't even have to. I didn't. It was all in the public domain. That's
Yeah,
how
yeah, it's
bad
not
this
like
whole
it's
thing
not
was.
hearsay. Yeah, it's not
No,
hearsay or whatever, yeah, yeah.
they said it. All you have to do is pull up the meeting and you can hear everything that's happening. So you're working in that situation. Now imagine if they're trying to take down a powerful position in governance. Imagine everybody else who doesn't have that type of job. They're going to get pretty scared, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So then you get everyone avoiding you. So no one wants to work with
Or no yeah. Yeah, no one wants to
no
be
one wanted to
associated
work
because
with me
yeah,
because
yeah.
if I talk to her, then I'm next,
Yes.
right?
Yep,
So
yep.
then nothing gets done. And you're desperately trying to maintain some form of professional sanity in a political environment. And it's like dying a slow death.
Right.
And as more and more people are afraid to talk to you, it takes a tremendous hit on your reputation. Now, meanwhile, these are all the people that
You've
I've
worked with
worked in
forever.
team. Well, I've helped,
Yeah.
helped, helped be successful. If there was a safety issue, always stepped up to the plate with safety equipment, redoing processes, making it better. But now everybody's afraid. And then finally in August, they,
Is this
they
August of
succeeded.
2023?
2022.
2022? Okay.
2022, August, they succeeded in moving the position. And my position got moved to the mayor's department. And literally, I
You must have
had,
really been scared. I don't know if it was scared's the right word, but you must have literally been just stressed out of your mind at this point, right?
yeah, I had been taken out the month of August because I had a significant case of PTSD. But the worst part about it was I hadn't told my family until the doctor took me out for the severe PTSD. And so I had to tell my husband why I wasn't going to work. And he was like, "Are you kidding me?" And then when I told my son, I took a trip to Indiana and told him, and he literally walked out of the house because he said, I can't even talk to you right now because you've been experiencing this all by yourself and you haven't said anything." And I said, "Well, I have to come clean now because I can't go back to work. I got an out of the work piece and I'm a total wreck." But then when I went back, they moved my office.
When did you go back?
I was at a month,
Okay.
and then I went back in September, and then they defunded me by mistake because then the commissioner of accounts took all the money out of my payroll line in September from the mayor. So they paid me for September, but then the deputy mayor called me on the phone and said, "Did you move money?" And I said, "What money?" I said, "You've taken that authority away from me. Only you can do it now. So what are you talking about?" "Well, you're in the negative for your entire month of pay for the month of September. What did you do?" And I'm like, "What did I do?
I wasn't even
I
here.
have no idea what you're doing." I
Yeah.
said, "Well, the commissioner of accounts took all of the money. We have to get it back." "Okay, well, you created the situation." So I said it very nicely. I don't know how to help you.
Yeah.
So then they started fighting about the money that they were taking from each other.
How surreal.
And,
Let,
you
let,
know,
let's let, let's back up for a second real quick because before we get further along in the story, Marilyn, you said that you filed a complaint with HR and HR didn't investigate. Like, how does HR just not investigate? Like, can you?
well, the five of us would like to know because each of the five of us in the command staff had filed written complaints on the form that city council approved, and none of them were investigated. And that individual still holds their job.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, if that individual's not going to investigate, from a legal perspective, it's incumbent upon the city attorney to do that.
Who
And the
is a
city
political appointee of the
attorney,
mayor?
right? And so he informed me in no uncertain terms. I said, "But you work for the city." And he said, "No, I work for the elected official. I do not work for the city." And by that time, I knew it was all lost. I was like, "That there's this. It is just. This is just not. There's no reality in my situation." So you just have to sit back, and they changed the position, Civil Service Commission for the city, changed the position to the mayor's office for September. But in doing so, they took out, there was a phrase that said that I had general supervision with great leeway. They took that out and said that the position had direct supervision by the mayor and the deputy mayor. Well, here's the problem. They don't even have administrative assistants in the city that have that terminology, direct supervision. So they had a director, myself at the time, that had direct supervision, but people of lower responsibility could have as much leeway as they want. And other directors at my level had the same leeway that I had once had.
Hmm.
So it was a punitive situation where imagine someone has the ability, is the problem solver and the closer, right, for an organization that
Mm-hmm.
has the ability to bring people together, create consensus, solve problems, now can't do any of that without the express permission of their boss.
So you've been
Like, you
effective.
can't
You
even have
you've been effectively neutered. There's not like you really don't have any responsibility at all at that point.
correct, more than neutered, like completely, yeah, totally like a total eunuch. Yep.
Yep. Man. So that's must have been a very surreal Twilight Zone-ish experience to go from being in an environment where you worked with the commissioner of accounts for 16 years. You have a great relationship, great track record, things are humming along. Then you have this massive upheaval because of an election. You have a commissioner a former commissioner who becomes mayor some 15 years later or so, and then they're gunning for you because of some bad blood. And then every step along the way, when you try to get some sort of vindication, some sort of relief, some sort of justice, the system that's designed to have these checks and balances essentially has been completely eroded and decimated to the point that you are completely left to fend for yourself.
Exactly. And the bigger piece was that, there was all of this rhetoric about how the existing risk and safety manual was going to be made better, and it was going to be presented to the city council. It's actually in the city council minutes. Um, it was going to be presented in September of 2022, and there was going to be a brand new processes, and everything was going to be, rainbows and unicorns. And so I redid the manual. I redlined it. I thought we're going to give control to whomever I was told to give control to. Never acted upon, never acknowledged. And to this day, the risk and safety manual from November of 2021 that I did with my team still exists. And it still says, that manual, by the way, still says, if you have a question, email marilyn.rivers at saratoga-springs.org. And I'm still on the website of the city's website.
Are you
And
serious?
no, I sometimes go out in Saratoga Springs and I'll have somebody come up to me and say, "You're not returning my email or my phone call. What you it's not like you." And it's like, "Well, what are you talking about?" And it's like,
They haven't
"Oh,
even
I've
put an
got
out
a
of office. They haven't put even an out of office on that bad boy. It's
no."
like
So it's on the so I'm like, I retired in April of 2023, and then
we're
they
a
look
year.
at
This is
me
a year later.
dumbfounded. It's like they're dumbfounded, like, well, I guess that's not why I'm getting any answers. And I'm like, well, maybe I could still help you if you, I mean, ask your question. You seem to be so, and and then they'll smile and they say, Marilyn, you're still answering my questions, and you don't even work there. He goes, thank that, they'll say thank you, and then they'll walk on. But if the rhetoric was that everyone was going to make something better, then why does it still exist exactly as it was created?
Right. When it's supposedly it wasn't good enough, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was the rhetoric. It was
Yeah.
all going to be made better, and then it's still the same. And I
So
I to this day will continue to take the high road, but I'm not going to take the low road and be as negative as the individuals that created the situation, right? Because it's a great community. They're just scared.
yeah.
Right? There's a whole bunch of people that if the person that was always there for them helping is taken out by a situation out of her control, then what does it say for the safety of the rest of them?
Yeah, I can feel the pain and see the anguish in your voice and in your face as you're talking to me, Marilyn. I can see it's still pretty raw to go through such a traumatic experience like that.
Yeah, I mean, I finally made it. I retired in April of 2023, and I had an opportunity to go because I'm a national speaker for Prima, so I was going down to Georgia Prima. They wanted me to do, a governance uh, a program on governance. And even to the bitter end, it was like, well, we're going to dock you, because we're going to prorate it from January 1st, not from your date of hire. So we're going to prorate. We're going to have to charge you for taking time to go teach at this conference, even though I was going to take vacation time and just take it
Yeah,
off. And I finally said, well, when's the first possible day I can leave this office? And they said, oh, April 10th. I said, see ya, because I was going to
yeah,
retire on April 30th. But the issue was that the position was my responsibilities were given to a politically appointed city attorney. Had no knowledge of risk management. They said the individual did, but and I left you know, you buy them in you can buy them from the bookstores. I did a this risk and safety manual for dummies, but I didn't call it that. I said, this is how to do risk and safety for the
Right.
city.
Right.
And it's like step by step by step, never read it. And so the city was insured by Travelers at the time. There were lawyers that I had worked for that were working on cases for the city. They couldn't get any answers. No one would return their phone calls. They couldn't get any information. And then you have lawyers that are spending hours and hours and charging, the insurance company for all those hours, right?
Is this after you retired,
After
or
I
is
left.
okay? So
Yeah.
let me catch the audience up on the timeline here. So back in the summer of 2022 or so, you went out on a 1 month leave for health issues, PTSD. You got moved over to the mayor's office at that point, your department, right? And then when did you file your lawsuit and what have you? Did you file that lawsuit after you retired or before you left?
After I retired, I had waited because I didn't need any additional daily trauma from folks coming into my office trying to micromanage and trying to make my life a living hell. So
And
what
so
I did
so
was I
so you
waited.
basically limped to the finish line from the summer of
Yep.
2022 until April of 2023. You kind of limped to the finish line because that was literally you needed to get to that 20-year mark to get your full pension and health benefits that you had earned, essentially.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep.
Right. And so in the pre-interview, to tell the audience that the way you framed it to me is that you needed to work 20 years in order to get those full benefits, and you worked 20 years in one day, correct? To
Yeah. Yep.
on so you filed this lawsuit in shortly after you retire, okay? And then walk us through that. Walk us through that real quick. So what was the allegation in the lawsuit? What was the claim? And then walk us through where we are now because you just had a recent development with that lawsuit.
So I filed a litigation against the city and the mayor and the commissioner of public safety, and the litigation was for a hostile work environment and discrimination based on age and sex. And I listed out all of the situations that occurred that were materially identified in the existing city council minutes and the video.
Okay.
So I didn't have to do didn't have to do a lot of work. They just I listed out because
They
it
did
was
the work for
all
you.
so very public. Yeah, they did the work for me, right? So it literally filed the litigation, and then the city's insurance lawyer filed a motion to dismiss because elected officials, and I apologize, I don't have the motion to dismiss in front of me, but essentially elected officials can say whatever they want to say
They're
about
immune.
anybody.
Essentially,
They're immune.
they have, yeah, okay. And then what happened there? Was
So
that dismissed by the courts, or how did that play
no,
out?
they filed the paperwork, but in the interim, during the entire time period, usually if you file a notice of claim, you're entitled to a 50H hearing. A 50H hearing is the plaintiff has to be deposed.
Okay.
They have to tell their story, right? Because
Right.
people we never got a chance to. Nobody wanted to. I was not. I was not given an opportunity to tell the story because I have it is very well known that I'm just very to the point, brutally honest, right? And the elected officials before this city council will say that they may never have agreed, but I always was forthright and honest and drove them, crazy because I have a tendency to, again, follow the rules of the law, follow the
Yeah.
rule of the law, and the community always comes first. So that's how it goes. So never during that time was I allowed to say exactly what transpired to precipitate my claim.
And that's kind of why you're here today, Marilyn, because we had this meeting to talk about kind of the insurance and the lawsuit. And you told me that throughout this entire process, you had never had a chance to share your story, to speak what had happened to you and how you were treated in any meaningful way. and you're not a typical guest that I have on. You're not a city manager. Usually, I have city managers on the show, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak about that because you were wronged, and I like standing up for the folks who get wronged and get pushed around by the bullies, especially some of these out of control elected officials. So as I understand it, you filed this claim and they countered to dismiss, and you were never given the opportunity to share your story, as you just alluded to. And then I'm not sure if I'm getting ahead of you or not, but the city's insurance company basically said, to hell with you guys. You guys are a bunch of bungling idiots. We're going to settle with Maryland, and they cut you a check. Is that a fair representation, or am I cutting some
Uh,
corners?
it's I. It sounds like I'm going to be weird, but I wasn't interested in the check. I was interested in the correction of the public record.
Right.
So my piece was that there's a monetary settlement, which quite frankly amounts to the accrued personal sick and vacation time they refused to give me when I retired. It's about the same amount. But the second piece was that the city had to read into the public record that I served my community. And it was a positive statement that truly is kind of unheard of when you have an employee that has filed litigation. But there's a new mayor now because the mayor I brought the litigation against lost the election in November
Okay.
of 23. And he said into the mic, elections have consequences because the city's insurance program, travelers at the time canceled the city. They had a great program from travelers. Travelers canceled because there was no risk and safety program. And
So
in
much for making it
going,
better, right? So much for making it
yeah,
better, right, Marilyn?
right.
Yeah.
But here's the issue. When the insurance agent went to market it, he's dealing with a really bad situation. The premium increased 1.7 million in addition to the 1.2 they were continually paying when I was working there, and the deductibles doubled. So
Wait,
the
wait, wait, wait.
deductible
Not only did the deductibles double, but you're telling me that the insurance premium the city paid citywide increased by more than 100%?
$1.7 million. It increased an additional $1.7 million.
Over the 1.2 that you guys were paying previous, right?
Yeah.
So, wow. So much for making it better, Mr. Mayor, who's
Well,
now
but
out of
the other
who's now out of office.
yes, so someone said, "Hey, you're the $1 million lady," and I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm probably the $2 million lady, but okay, it's not the point. The point is that I wanted my reputation back. I lost 2 years of look when you're building, and that's the problem about attracting talent, right? For even city managers and public service. Who the hell wants to work for public service when you give 18 years, 24/7, 365? My husband would be the first one to tell you, I was getting phone calls at 2, 3 in the morning. I was getting phone calls overseas on my personal phone to answer questions when I was on vacation in Europe. And then you get a new
D-
order in
yeah, and they just want
and
you
you
to like a
lose
piece of trash to
everything.
get discarded. Yeah, yeah, you just get discarded
But
like
your
nothing mattered.
reputation, and because social media and nothing ever gets scrubbed from the internet. It's anytime you look up Marilyn Rivers, Saratoga Springs, you see psychodrama, and you think the headline maybe pertains to Marilyn Rivers. No, it pertains to the existing city council psychodrama, not mine. I was just the
Right.
person that got caught in the crossfire.
So this lawsuit basically gets settled for $100,000, which is arguably just makes you whole for what you should have had before you retired, for your PTO and stuff. So you didn't really benefit financially at all that much, but
No,
you did get your statement read into the record. Is that correct?
I did, and then I was fortunate enough to have a reporter from a local newspaper ask me for a statement. And I countered the statement with, and it gave me an opportunity to really thank the city of Saratoga Springs. And my lawyer was, he said, I've never had a plaintiff that literally thanked the thank the person, they sued, but my response was, I'm honored and privileged to have had the opportunity to work for the community of Saratoga Springs and as the city's representative on various projects. And it went on from there.
Yeah.
It expressed gratefulness for my team, and the best part about it is that my the command staff and I, we meet, the retired command staff, we meet every month. We talk about community, we talk about the good things in community, but we all agree that we were totally failed by the
The
very
system. Yeah.
system that we built, that was supposed
Yeah.
to be built on respect and integrity. And when we were looking, all the respect and integrity that we gave all those years, when we were looking for that same respect and integrity, it was never given.
Right, right. It makes me feel really good to help you tell your story, Marilyn, because I know when we talked before, there's just a lot of pain and anguish in the fact that you just never got a chance to really share your side of it, that you just sort of were muzzled. And so I hope you feel like you got a chance to share your story today. And thank you for sharing it with our audience. Before we wrap up this episode, and we're going to have a part two at a later date, I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk to the audience about what you're doing now with your consulting business and kind of plug what you're doing and explain how you might be able to help others who are listening to this.
Instead of riding off into the sunset and licking my wounds, I formed a consulting a group called Rivers Risk Consulting. I continued to be a risk warrior. I am teaching nationally. I just got back from Virginia Public Risk Management Association. We did a great talk about risk allocation. I'm doing a lot of work with nonprofits and risk management, and I'm trying to do that communication strategies and risk strategies. I really do believe that I have a lot to offer to entities that are trying to improve their claims history, that are trying to become sexy for insurability. I've lived through a fire, and I am coming out the other side having captured back what someone tried to take away. So the message is positive, right? It's being able to understand that regardless of the circumstances, risk management will always have the opportunity to succeed if those partnerships and consensus can be built. But at the end of the day, we all have to believe in an ethical respect for governance and the opportunity. You know, my boss for 16 years says it all. It's all about community, and it's all about the rules of the law. And if you can embrace the two of those, God bless all of us. We are going to do some fantastic things together. And I do appreciate the opportunity for you to tell my story. I am not a victim, I'm a survivor, right? So I'd like
Awesome.
all the public service professionals out there, city managers, their admins, the officers, everyone to know that if you truly believe in yourself and your profession, then you have the ability to stand tall, and it's just one step at a time.
So, is there an ideal municipal profile, demographic, geographic region, or anything like that that's ideally suited for your services, or that makes the most sense? I don't know if you have a national audience, obviously, but do you work with clients across the country, or is there a sweet spot for your business or your specialty?
I absolutely do work with municipalities across the country. I am also working with some property and casualty insurers. I have a tremendous amount of legislative experience in writing policies and protocols, and I have and will be working on some best practices for some educational institutions for an insurance company. So, small or large, I think that as the organizations and municipalities are small, it's great for folks like myself to be placed on retainer to be able to help, right? Because they
Right.
can't afford risk managers and they can't afford the
Right.
benefits and the salaries. Hey, I'm out here willing to help cost effectively and to utilize the resources that they have and to make them believe in themselves. So I think that's important.
Excellent, Marilyn. Excellent. I know in our next episode, we'll unpack a little bit more of your subject matter expertise and how you can really maybe add some value and help these managers and executives who are listening to the podcast. Real quick, how can they find you online? Maybe give them your website address, and then we'll wrap this one up and see you in part two.
Hey, it's riversriskconsulting.com, and I'm MLR at riversriskconsulting.com. And I'd love to hear from you.
There you go, riversriskconsulting.com. Thank you very much, Marilyn Rivers. You're fantastic. I'm glad I got to help you share your story. I'm sorry for what happened to you. Obviously, you are not alone. It's you're not walking the journey alone because it's happening to a lot of people. But thank you very much for sharing it, and we'll talk again later on another episode. I am Joe Turner. This is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. If you like the program, please make sure you hit that follow, subscribe button. Please leave a rating and review on the platform of your choice. Thank you very much. Catch you next time.